Hey,
Yes.
welcome. That's
Um,
no cat in the hat.
no, that's not Cat in the Hat. That's a witch hat. I
All
got a
right.
whole variety here to choose
All
from.
right. Well, girl, put them on at any point. Show me another.
This one's my favorite.
Oh yeah. The rainbow.
It's really supposed to be a cowl neck. My sister
Okay.
made it,
Oh,
but I wear it
nice.
like a hat,
All right.
like this one too.
Fun, girl. All right. It's playful. I'm liking the colors. You know
Oh, here's a
what?
good one.
Oh yeah, please, let's show us. Oh yeah.
That's for when I'm shoveling.
Denise of North Toledo.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. That's a wizardy witch's hat or just a wizardy hat?
Yeah, what either. Either's
It's good,
fine.
huh? So as you keep changing hats, I'm just going to keep changing the shape, dimension, and form of my
Creative
hat.
self-expression is so very important. I got to
You
remember
got
how to turn off this background getting because it changes my hat.
it does. It does. I don't know how I turned mine off, but I did. Anyway, hey, listen, friends, hello. Hello from Holly Elissa and from Denise.
Hello.
Hey, we are with you as two trauma survivors walking each other home, and it is the last week in October 2024. And we come together each week to invite you to join us as we playfully talk about how we as trauma survivors can have a meaningful, creative, self-expressive life, no matter what we're given. And we accept the truth. The truth is our brains, our souls, our spirits were affected severely by having been severely traumatized as children. Our brain stopped work. My brain stopped working. My brain went into overload. My brain went into survival mode. And you know what? As a 78-year-old adult, I can still go back to those ways if I'm retriggered. So the question is, how on earth can we have really good lives? Really good lives, given this was our early childhood. And, a number of people, as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, said, 80% of trauma, I don't know if you've heard this, Denise, 80% of trauma survivors go to their graves without ever owning or telling anybody that they are trauma survivors. Do you believe
Yeah,
that?
I do. I tell a lot of people, and they never really, nobody ever really does say it back. I can feel that they relate to my experience, but they typically don't say it. It's a secret.
Yeah. And why would we keep it a secret?
Um, Maybe family loyalty or
Mm-hmm.
some kind of
Yeah.
conditioning, that we have.
My friend Denise always just cuts to the chase and tells the absolute truth in like a phrase, a sentence, or a word. And yeah, loyalty. Loyalty to keep a family's secrets is one of the most compelling, viscerally compelling commands we get as traumatized children. I was so terrified of telling my family's truth that I thought I was going to die. I mean, Bessel van der Kolk says, and you've talked about this, Denise, that trauma survivors feel like if we have feelings, if we talk about what happened and we have feelings, that we'll be swept away to our death in a muddy, gunky, crammed up mess of a tsunami.
Yes.
If I start crying, I'm going to be out of control. And that's it. Out of control is what we experienced. We experienced adults who needed to have been in control being destructively, in a deadly way, sometimes out of control,
Invasive.
invasive, intrusive, totally disrespecting of boundaries. Yeah. So who would have the courage to say that out loud?
Right. It's not comfortable for most people
And why the hell do you and I do it?
because we want to heal and we want to encourage others to heal. And I'm not trying to say that you have to talk about it to heal. You don't,
Mhm,
but you
mhm.
do have to want to heal it.
So I think healing is right again. Denise sort of nailed it. Look, for me to heal, I have to tell the truth. And I'm always saying and feeling the truth sets me free. What I did was I kept the secret for years, for decades, I kept the secret. I was honoring my father. I was honoring my mother. The unspoken command was, thou shalt make your family look good. Thou shalt bring honor to your father. Now I'm Sicilian, half Sicilian, so that was part of it. 100% Sicilian on my father's side. That was part of it. Our job as traumatized children was to make our families look acceptable. And in my case, because of the perfectionism, make our families look extraordinarily good, perfect. I came from the perfect family. And I bet that a number of trauma survivors come from perfect families. I often ask, was anybody else from the perfect family? And people laugh because they were. What does that mean, perfect family? It means I'm going to cover up the fact that my family had incest. My family had murderous beatings. My family had mental illness. I'm going to cover that up because here's what I came to, Denise. Here's one of the truths. In primitive cultures and even in modern day cultures, if one person in a family is tainted with mental illness, I don't like that term, but that is the way it's expressed, tainted. One person in a family is affected by mental illness, the whole family might have.
Right. Which also homosexuality used to be an illness or considered an illness
Yeah, it
also.
was. It was. And what was that? The DMR?
Yeah.
Yeah. But people were, I mean, you know what? I studied maybe 2 decades ago a course called Opening the Circle. It was a powerful course that came out of California for early childhood professionals. And it was about what was going on in the world, not just United States, what was going on in the world with people whose gender orientation isn't what is the dominant
Standard, right.
standard, the dominant. I don't even know what dominant is anymore because I think people are just ourselves, you know? Okay, girl is out on an exploration.
This is my hat.
I'm loving it, girl, and I'm being the little bo peep. But oh my God, you're right. Here's what happened in two things happened in that course that were really powerful. We all thought we were kind of liberal Boston people taking this course, you know, people from Head Start and people who've been around the world for work and you know all this stuff. But we signed up for this course, and before we knew it, in walked a panel of people who had been through gender reshaping, gender reorientation. A man from the New York City Police Department who had always known he was a female, always known she was a female. And there she was on the streets of New York City, all dressed up and having to act the part. You know, the tough police officer part in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And this person came in to sit on the panel with the broadest shoulders, hair that was permed, but had no particular shape. You know, it takes a while to get our style down.
Right.
I'm 78 and I'm still getting my style down, right? And with a skirt on and heels. And this person like walked up to sit at this table. And I was fascinated. But here's what also happened, Denise. As she told her story, I realized once again the threat of death. The threat of death, of telling the secret, the threat of death of not belonging somewhere, and the threat of death of being different than the way we are supposed to be. And so this person described what it was like for her as a woman to return to the police department to hand off something. I think she was like resigning or something, but hand off papers and walk from the door throughout the whole workplace with people who had known her as a him, with people who were raised, many of them, to believe in strict gender rules and roles. And I thought, and she was afraid for her own life.
Yeah.
Were you ever, as a trauma survivor, afraid for your own life or afraid for your sanity?
The last time that I was subjected to my stepfather's abuse, uh, which it was kind of a ritual experience. And
Which makes it worse in many ways.
right. And that was the time that I became very scared. I was full on scared. My molecules were vibrating. And but then that's when I ran up the steps and told my mom what was happening.
And did that make a difference?
I never was molested again by him.
Did your mom take any immediate action, or did you just run up the stairs, tell her, and not know what happened next?
No, I don't know what happened next. We went out on the boat, the whole family in bikinis, and hung out on the boat. I have
With him?
photos from that day. I always remember that was the day that I told.
Oh, so you weren't killed for telling the secret.
No, I wasn't
What do
killed.
you what do you think made that difference? Because you were scared to death with good reason not to tell it.
Right. Uh, yeah. Because my sister had told before, but
Right.
then when they asked me, I said no, it didn't happen to me. I lied. And then,
I want to stop right there, though, Denise, because when we lie, it's not like we're lying as a moral defect.
no,
Wow.
it was a safety procedure.
It's a safety procedure. It was a way of staying alive.
Right.
When I lied to protect the predator.
Right.
When I lied to keep my family intact, wounded as it was. When I lied to keep the world from knowing about my mother's mental illness. And when I lied because I couldn't myself face what it was like to be involved in incest. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face it. So here we are, quick to say, well, I lied, I didn't tell it. The thing is that I'm quick to do as a trauma survivor is to blame myself any which way I can. Do you have that
Right.
too?
I sometimes, yeah. I mean, there is some shame but no, he was the adult, I was the kid. There was no reason for it.
And how old were you at that point?
That was about 16.
Wow. Wow. See, for me, the sexual abuse, and by the way, if you're listening to us, we are two trauma survivors walking each other home, and we talk about stuff we went through as if we were old friends, which we are becoming old friends, and we have been talking about this for 5 years. However, we know that it's not easy for everybody to hear this stuff or to talk about this stuff. And so we want to protect and honor your boundaries. We're not here to scare you by talking about incest. Oh my God, we're not here to send you running for the hills. And the last thing we're here for is to re traumatize you. So
Right.
there are things we've discovered that we do that we invite you to be able to do. And one of them is I'll do what Denise usually does, and then she can talk about other things we do to help ourselves stay our adult true selves rather than tumbling into the disgraced, defamed, at fault children that we were taught to be when we were trauma survivors, when we were victims. So one of the things you can do, and one of the things we know we can do, is this: Google trauma warm zones. When you find, I'm sorry, is that what it is? Trauma warm lines, not just
Warm
zones.
lines, right.
Warm lines. Just Google warm lines and you'll probably come up for trauma. And you'll see that most states in the United States have a free warm line you can call, and it's not a hotline. A hotline is when I'm in real crisis. If I need a hotline, there are hotlines. If you need one, there are hotlines. However, there are now warm lines where people recognize that trauma survivors need, before we get to the extreme, before we get in extremis of having panic attacks and flashbacks, before that, before harming ourselves, before that, we can contact someone that knows what we're talking about and who will, as Walt Whitman said, be curious, not judgmental, be a good listener, and be present to us. Sometimes
Empathetic, understanding.
That's right. It's listening with understanding, and it's listening without judging. Because one of the things I feared the most was being judged as bad dog, but worse than that, it's your fault. Can't you ever do anything right? Get her out of my sight, all of that stuff. So keeping the secret was preeminent to me and remains preeminent for that 80% of people who, as Vanderkook says, go to their graves without ever sharing their trauma. What would the cost be of sharing trauma if you're the only person in your family that does that?
To heal, but
That's the benefit you got.
right.
Right. That's a benefit. That's what this program is all about. And at the same time, the cost.
Oh, the cost of it is exclusion from your family.
And carrying all exclusion from the family and feeling responsible for all the shame of the centuries that's been passed on. I felt like.
You can also drink water if you feel
Right
triggered.
on.
We always have water next to us because water is the what do they call that? It breaks down everything.
Yeah, it's the elixir. It's just very simple, and it's a hope we hope will always be available. But for people to calm down, if we place ourselves near a body of water, it takes about 10 minutes. I mean, how many of us say our favorite place on earth is to go walking beside the ocean? Yeah, it's for the sound of the waves, but it's also just to be in the presence of water. So, honey, I got
I
my two
remember what they
glasses.
call it, the universal solvent.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
universal solvent. Like water.
That's that's right. That's right. So
Almost everything
actually,
will dissolve in it.
yes. Ah, yes. So what we were going to talk about, what I had in mind and heart to talk about is play, but let's do that another time. Play is also a universal way of recovery. It's a universal way of finding out who we are. It's, as you said right up front, self-expression. But here we are talking about keeping secrets. And so let's do that. Let's finish this program on how the hell do we live with ourselves if we're living a lie? Because keeping a secret is not telling the truth.
Right.
So here's an example in my family of the visceral nature of keeping a secret. My mother in the evening would turn into, and it was horribly sad, she would devolve That's another word when you totally fall apart, collapse, disintegrate. She would disintegrate into a moaning animal or a person thrown into the pits of hell. And she was raised in a very religious way. So being thrown into the pits of hell was probably the way she was experiencing it. And I've come to see, because I didn't understand it, no one explained it to me. It was my sisters and I, we were all isolated. My sister Lynn and I were in the same room, but we were isolated. We couldn't talk about it. We could not say what was happening. We would be in our bedrooms at night and we'd hear this horrible, wretched moaning of an animal that had a death wound, as if someone had struck or like fired a poisoned arrow into this animal. But it was my mother. It was my mother, and she would have the same awful disintegration if we ever took a trip together, if the trip weren't to her hometown. Whenever she felt she was getting out of control and was unsafe, she would collapse into this terrifying being, which I think she felt like she was at the gates of hell. And what was that about? Therapists have helped me see this, that it was probably the fact that my mother, who kept the secret of being an incest survivor till the day she died, called her father a prince of a man, because that's what her mother said. It was the way not to share with anybody what was going on. And my mother was the most attractive of some attractive children in that family. And so her father molested her, took advantage of her, was a predator, and he was an alcoholic. And so married, how the hell is an incest survivor in an intimate relationship going to know how to do an intimate relationship, a sexual relationship, when all we knew of sexuality was intrusion, invasion, being overtaken, being threatened, being silenced, having these horrible physical feelings of being ripped apart, being choked to death. And here's to more water, or to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Look, this is tough stuff. And it takes courage to talk about it. But here's the point. When my mother was making those horrible sounds, it's very possible that my father was approaching her, husband to wife. And back in those days, it was the wife's marital duty. Up in those days, back until the 1993, I think, spousal rape was legal in the United States of America. It was a wife's responsibility to be of service to her husband. And I think there were times when my mother just couldn't do it. I think that the flashbacks, the memory, the shaking, all of that just emerged, and she just started making these horrible sounds. And they were effective because they probably got my father off of her. But no one ever said what was going on. And to a child, the youngest in the family, to hear this wretched gates of hell, horrible, horrible stuff going on, was made even worse. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I feared that sound the rest of my life. And one time I said to my trauma therapist, I said, I've never been able to make this sound out loud, but if you're willing to hear it, I'm willing to, in this safe place, make the sound.
Okay.
And he said, yes, please do. And I watched the power of that sound almost blow him through the wall. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, except that he, a very mature, very, how can I say, boundaried PhD, not every PhD is so, but he had decades of working with trauma survivors. I could see the look on his face and I could see his response. And to have carried that sound inside of me for all those years, the body kept the score. And why am I saying this? I'm also saying it, Denise, and people with us, because the next morning, I would go downstairs to make myself breakfast before going off to school. My mother would be in her ritual place every morning, washing dishes by hand with her back to us. It was never discussed. It never happened. It was a secret. And I would go off to school, a terrified child, with this sound of the gates of hell opening up a door away from me, and expected to be a good student, expected not to cry, expected not to fall apart. If there were trauma counselors for little kids, even if there were, oh my God, if there were what do they call them? Therapy dogs. If my South Corning Elementary School had a therapy dog, I would have buried myself in that dog's fur and never let go.
Right.
So there it is, Denise, part of this thing about keeping a secret, besides having no choice about it, except you were 16 and said, I'm not keeping this secret anymore. And I said, I'm not keeping this secret anymore. What was with, what did that
told
take?
my mom. I only told my mom at that time, and she said it will never happen again. And then it never happened again. And we never talked about it again.
What a double whammy. She assured you it wouldn't happen again.
Which it didn't. Right.
And that's remarkable.
But however, then 2 years later, I told we were having a sleepover at one of my friends who played basketball, and the coach was there. It was a big party. And I told my coach, our coach there, that what he did, and she never said anything. I don't think they were mandated reporters yet.
They were not mandated reporters, and not only that, they were bound
Right.
by the code of silence. They couldn't say anything. They couldn't say anything. And so where was it a safe place? You could tell your mother, and the brilliant thing about that is she actually did something. She stopped him. He stopped him. I mean, you still were subjected to going out in the boat with him. You still lived with this guy, right?
Right, right. But
But
I thought all that time, I thought my mom did not like doing the sexual part. And she was from the bra burning era when women could say, no, thank you, I think, I don't know if they could or not, but I believed that she didn't like it. And then so it was my duty to be there. And I thought I was protecting my siblings.
which you probably were.
Actually, my one sister said once described to me what happened to her, and it was exactly how it happened to me. It was like a ritual, so it happened to her too. My other sister says, I
You
want
didn't
to try
see that.
another hat. Hold on.
Yeah. My friends, if you're joining us, we're wearing our Halloween garb here. And isn't it amazing that one little simple thing like a hat
It's
can
a
change
costume.
something? It's a costume, honey. That's why we do it with kids all the time. Wow.
This,
Wow.
I just
Oh,
brought all my winter hats up in my gloves.
that was smart, girl.
Yeah,
Because did
because
you had
I
snow
keep
yet?
them down in the basement for storage, but we do a protest, Black Lives Matter protest every
Yeah.
Monday and Wednesday at 12:15 to 12:30. And
Mm-hmm.
it's cold to hold the signs now. So I had to go get my hats and my gloves.
So where I live in New England, they show this weather cam thing on the top of Mount Washington. Washington is just the next state over. And guess what? Snow.
Wow.
Snow. It's got snow on Mount Washington. You know what? I realize that we have very few days left of light.
Right. Couple more days.
And that affects the bejesus out of me. It really does bother me. And I know, wait, that's Snoopy with a red. What's the red thing in the front? Oh, he's
That's
just
the
sitting on
top of the doghouse.
his roof of the doghouse.
And
Sweetie, let's.
they're looking at the stars.
Oh, yeah, honey. That's what saves us. So, listen, let's talk about secrets kill. Let's talk about how secrets kill. If being loyal means keeping secrets, and in a dysfunctional family, we keep secrets because we don't have a choice. Ah, here comes Santa Claus. Here comes Santa Claus. Because we don't have a choice. If we break that silence, we break the silence at what possible harm?
For me, I believed I wasn't conscious of it, but I
Mhm.
put that shame into my body, into my ovaries, into my uterus, and gave myself a disease called endometriosis.
Which is really painful.
Yeah. And so I totally believe that's where I put everything that was the shame, the silence, the guilt, all of it I put in there, and I then suffered from endometriosis.
Did you have that treated?
I had like 3 surgeries in a row. Yeah. First, they burned it off. Oh, that was
Cauterized.
horrible.
Ouch.
It was back before modern medicine.
Like they burned at the stake, like Joan of Arc.
They
Ah,
went in and like cauterized each piece. And then
how did you recover from that? That sounds like
that
ouch.
took so long to recover. It hurt. By the time I recovered from the pain of burning it off,
Mhm.
the new stuff was growing back.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So I ended up getting a laser surgery then, which the laser
Yeah.
surgery was very good, but I had to pay for it in advance and because I didn't have insurance and it was kind of expensive, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
saved up for it and immediately I felt better after that laser surgery. It
Wow.
was no recovery time. I just felt good. I didn't feel one speck of that doctor loved going in there like he had videos of it was like Star Wars in there. He would go in there and shoot all the endocrine and he loved it and he did a really good job. But then
I'm glad.
6 months later it grew back. So then I
And
had
then
a
what happened?
complete hysterectomy.
Oh, okay. How old were you, sweetie?
30.
Oh my gosh.
So that's
Oh,
where my body took it. Other body things that happen is we smoke, so that damages our body.
and what's smoking? What did it do? What does it do for you? Or what did
For
it do
me, it
for
made me adult. I went at the time of starting, yeah, it made me adult. Uh what it does for me, I'm not quite sure, but it is an addiction that I really struggle with today.
you?
You know,
Mhm.
I went out and smoked a cigarette before we had this meeting. And I you know, in the smoking, luckily I practice Reiki, so I try to convince myself that I'm healing myself from the 3 or 4 cigarettes I smoke a day. You know, I try to heal myself from the damage that I do, but it's dangerous. Smoking is risky.
It is, and it's so part of being a trauma survivor because we learn why would you say smoking? What are you doing to yourself when you're smoking?
I'm giving myself a break, actually, is how it
Yes.
has developed over my years. I started smoking at home in my childhood home at age 13.
Mhm.
I was allowed to smoke it. buy my own pack of cigarettes and smoke them. And I did. I smoked, since then. So now I'm 66, so that's a lot of years of smoking. So I
So,
know when I
yeah.
smoke, uh, it's an addiction rationalization that I go through, that I shouldn't have this cigarette. It's probably going to hurt me. It's not healthy, but then I go smoke it. So
So
it,
tell me I hear you, girl. It's something that you have developed a pattern, an unconscious pattern with in your own body.
right.
So, and I watch
I
other,
have even quit. I have quit for a year. I've quit for months.
wow.
I've quit sometimes I quit for 2 weeks, and then I'll say, okay, go, here's your reward. Go buy a pack. It's,
Hmm.
I still struggle with it, but, hopefully I'm not, killing myself, which that's what
I
we
hope
do.
not. I
Right.
hope not. But thank you for raising this, because now we're talking about another aspect of keeping the secret. And one of the consequences and one of the ways we do it is, or one of the functions of keeping secrets and keeping things quiet is to punish ourselves.
Right. And self-medicate.
And
So
that's
it's,
punishing
yeah,
and self-care. There's the weird thing. What you're doing with your hands is
yeah,
suggesting to me like it's a both end.
it
Keeping
is.
the secret is, I got to do it. I'm honoring my family, and that's my job. Children's job, whether even as adults, is to honor their family, right? And
Right.
honor thy father and thy mother. But at the same time, we are harming ourselves because we know there's a cost to keeping the secret. There's a
Right.
cost.
And it's the same thing. Like, even like I hide that I smoke. Like, there's some people that I will smoke around, but mostly it's a secret that, I go
Mhm.
outside in my van, or hide behind the van and smoke a cigarette. So it still has that secret component, or
You
hiding.
got it, sweetie. Here's a definition of an addiction. An addiction is something we have to lie about. We have to keep it secret.
Right.
Because what are you afraid of? Or what are you concerned about if people knew? Would you
People knew
just
that I
very,
was hurting myself, that's what I don't like. If people know that, I'm hurting myself with these cigarettes.
and yet I think what you're protecting is your vulnerability. Does that
A
make
lot of
sense?
times too, yeah, that smoke is a cloud, right? A protective cloud.
Isn't
A
there
lot of
something from the,
times in my life along the way, this is
yes.
how I would relate to other, especially in schools. That if
Mhm.
I find the smokers, I was good. I belonged. That,
There was a wreath. There was a wreath around you. And
yeah,
even in one of the songs about jolly old Saint Nicholas, one of those songs, he's surrounded by a wreath of smoke. He's smoking a pipe or something.
right.
That scene is really attractive. I
Uh-huh.
I'm a movie fan, and I love the movies of the 30s and 40s and what
Right.
they say about culture, what they say about justice. And honey, everybody is smoking.
Everybody smoked. Yeah.
And it's a gesture. I have a friend who said to me, he's been in recovery for decades from alcohol, but he said he decided he had to give up smoking because he got even more fierce as a smoker when he gave up alcohol. And all the people in his 12-step group with him, they'd have smoking breaks. It was totally
Right.
acceptable. Smoke was all over the place, smoke and coffee
They used to smoke right in the meetings, but then
meetings.
then it came along. I think California started it, no public smoking, and then it
Boy, I
spread
didn't know if
across the
that was
country. We had to hide.
right. I know. And I didn't know if that was ever going to pass. It was kind of like as scary to people as the unisex bathrooms,
Or
you know?
right, or have to wear a seatbelt. That was another thing that spread
Right.
across. Yeah.
And what's the problem? The law is saying, we want you to take care of yourself.
Right.
Now,
Be safe.
be safe. Why? Because now the law, I know as a lawyer, the law may have a moral consequence, like keeping people alive and healthy, but the law is protecting the financial interests.
It's
If
helping
people,
the insurance companies so we don't light a cigarette and be distracted driving. That's how these laws go to help
and it's keeping people from, it's keeping the hospitals from having to deal with so much sickness.
now, right?
Oh,
Now the smoking, right.
you got it. Oh my God.
I
So
like this one the best, I think, of all mine.
yeah, girl, we'll do the blue hat thing from here on out. Listen, I think it's cool. Here's what I think. Self-abuse and trauma survivors goes hand in hand. And self-abuse is actually permitted.
Right.
I knew as a child, if I beat myself up and I blamed myself and I looked down on myself, that I would be acceptable in my family. If
Right.
I just agreed with them, you're right, I'm stupid. You're right, I'll never amount to anything. You're right. And my sisters would hear me and they'd say, what are you talking, Holly Elissa? Because my oldest sister, who died, but she can't remember anything of her childhood said, oh, they always supported me and said I could become whatever I wanted to become. And I said, girl, I heard of, I wanted to say I grew up in a very different family because what I heard was, as a woman, you can be a wife and mother, and you can become a teacher. They didn't even give us the option of nurses, but you can become a teacher in case something happens to your husband and you have to support your family.
And the
Those were the
nurses had to be extra smart people,
extra smart, extra
women,
uptight,
extra smart women, right?
right, in science. And I know people my age who are saying, boy, I was way ahead of the STEM thing. A lot of my college roommates were like math and science majors. And I thought, what did they do? I mean, I was impressed. It was not a language that I spoke, but
Right.
it was one that they spoke. And they could do it there. But out in the world, who was ready to accept one of those? What's the movie about the Black women who were so important to NASA?
Right.
They did all those things. They were the scientists. They were the ones that were inventing things.
Mathematicians.
They were the ones that could be counted on. Yeah,
They
they were the
calculated the
mathematicians. And
trajectory and all that.
I mean, amazing, amazing. They could count on those women, and yet they had to
Walk
walk.
2 miles to go to the bathroom in the colored bathroom.
Right. That's right. So here we are crossing between, and it's honest. For a while, for months, two people walking each other home was a Black friend, a woman who talked about being traumatized every day for being Black, as
Right.
well as being a survivor.
Right.
So we get all of these different projections. Women get projected upon, gay people get projected upon, older women get projected upon, people that
Black folks, brown folks.
anybody that looks different gets projected upon.
Except for those
Anybody,
privileged white guys. They're the only good ones. They're the top of the food chain, babe.
and don't we want to believe that in less than a week that will change?
Yes. Break that ceiling.
Wow, finally,
I hope
break
we
the
do.
ceiling and break us all from the allegiance, the keeping the secret that it's okay to be an abusive male.
Right. Patriarchy condones abuse.
Patriarchy condones all kinds of abuse. Like last night, I was watching Cry the Beloved Country with James Earl Jones about South Africa. The colonialization, that's what patriarchy did. And the harsh thing that's really hard for me, because I was part of that, it's just harsh awareness. I was part of the call, and one of the candidates running in the United States, the first night they had Black women for this for Kamala. And then the second night they had white women for Kamala. And like the Zoom kept breaking down with us because there's so many of us in there.
Right.
But what we were hearing was what
I
we
was
needed
there.
to.
I was there
Okay,
with
girl.
that people.
So remember what did you remember that? Because I want to say the thing that struck me powerfully was it was white women elected a sexual molester. We
Right,
elected a felon. Maybe he wasn't known as a felon at the time, but he has certainly anyway, we did all this. And we needed to change.
right.
And honey, I've had conversations with women and men who accept the colonialization of our minds and our beings. And
Well,
I don't,
because we have a privilege, you know, like my peers at Central Catholic High School, a lot of them cannot even admit white privilege. But, you know, those of us who have related to and worked with and engaged with people of other races, we know that the privilege.
and it goes deep. The
Right.
privilege,
And that's why a lot of people kept voting for him because, or a lot of women last time in 2019 or whatever it was, because they they are afraid of losing their privilege.
and that's what I heard from that meeting, that we white women cozy up to the male because somehow that feels like we might be protected. It feels like the power might be shared. And I'm remembering Phyllis Schlafly. I remember being in law school in the 70s when the Equal Rights Amendment was really looked like we might make it, you know? And then out came this woman named Phyllis Schlafly, who essentially said, do you women want to be masculinized? Don't you want to be taken care of? Don't you want to have the husband knowing his place and you're knowing your place? She prevails.
Yeah, she did.
She prevails. And that meant so much. And we don't know.
A lot more years of fighting for the fringy of us who recognize privilege and we want equality. We want it to be fair for everyone. Like right now, I suffer because I only made 85 cents to the dollar of a privileged white guy because my social security can only go this high.
That's right. That's right. And I was in, because I was of my profession, I was in some of those echelons
Right.
where I could have been paid more, but was I? Oh, I don't think so. I remember a law school dean saying to another person on staff, we've got to raise your salary because you've got to be sending Robbie, his son, off to college. Now, guess what? This guy had a daughter too. There was never any mention about we got to get so and
Right.
so into the best colleges, which are the most expensive, which are basically giving him class privilege as well as male privilege.
Exactly. The continuity of privilege, but it's changed, you know, it's changed. More people are aware. I always believe in this 99th monkey theory. Pretty soon, enough people are going to realize the truth and we're going to tip over to being empathetic.
You know, I just read, and we've got about 8 minutes left, 9 minutes actually. I just read a definition of evil. And I have a friend who's also a recovering attorney. Her name is Colquitt. And she said to me, she was from Georgia. She had this wonderful accent. She said, I did an inquiry into evil. And I thought, what a fascinating thing that she would devote her energies to understanding evil. And I have done that a lot myself. What is evil? When does wrongdoing cross over into evil? And because I was a criminal lawyer, I looked a lot at the mental state and the intention. And here's what someone wrote very, very simply. Someone who also had done an inquiry into evil and said, evil is the total lack of compassion. Evil is the total throwing out of any desire to be concerned for anybody but ourselves.
Right.
And that puts me back in this whole question of what's mental illness and what's evil. For example, that's just defined a narcissist.
Right.
Narcissists cannot or do not have the capacity to care, but they do know what they're doing. That's the thing that really troubles me. The sadism that goes along with narcissism. We don't talk about this much, but fortunately, I have another trauma survivor friend who was subjected to sadism. Sadism often goes along with narcissism. So I experienced not just the incest, but I experienced the sadism, which had a punitive self-pleasure.
Right.
Those male narcissists were getting pleasure about seeing me suffer. They
Right.
took joy in that. Now that feels evil to me because there's something that goes beyond, not above, but beyond, but below and beyond, something that goes beyond just being cruel and abusive. There is a desire to enjoy somebody's suffering.
Right.
And that's what I experienced. And that's what I was afraid of. And I had to keep that secret from myself. Did
Right.
you?
Um, Not that I'm aware of. Like I was neglected, severely by my
Mhm.
mom, but I never felt like it was narcissism.
What about with your stepfather?
Although, with who?
Your stepfather that was so sexually abusive.
Right. It was never, I mean, part of the ritual was that I was to be like frozen. And there was a power in that, uh, for him
Mm-hmm.
to, put that on me. So, that could be that was the suffering.
Power to make you totally dead in the
Right.
moment. It
Right.
was a dead state, totally
Yes.
frozen.
Right.
Okay. So let's go beneath this right now, Denise. We're talking about keeping secrets. We're talking about the terror that we kept inside. We're talking, thanks to you, we're talking about what happens to our bodies when bodies keep the score, when stuff goes inside of us. And I've got plenty of that myself with arthritis, the keeping the pain inside my own bones and autoimmune disease. I know so many of us that have autoimmune disease.
Yeah. And
My sister,
anybody that I've ever known that had endometriosis, like I had, they were
mhm,
abuse survivors also.
right. And guess what? All the infertility stuff often goes along with being a sexual abuse survivor.
Right.
And I've seen many people who don't have their own biological children that were abuse survivors, but they sure love on others, either
Right.
other children or they take care of their parents. They're in some ways fulfilling the caregiving desire,
Right.
but just not allowed or able or, physiologically to have kids. I'm one of those people. I was not. I went for infertility treatment. And in my case, and it was horrible. Some of that stuff was really painful and it was awful. I'm not going to say more than a sentence about what it was like to see people in a drop of a sex act getting pregnant. And there I was, and it felt really sad and angry making. When we found out what the doctor had to say, there was nothing they said wrong with me. I was convinced it was me, of course, but there was something with my spouse, and he didn't want to get that remedied. So we adopted. but let's look at our time and say, yeah, let's wrap this, Denise. What would you
Yes.
say? Because I know we both reflect on this, and we can invite our listeners too to reflect on this. What would you say is a takeaway that you've got from, not a takeaway, what are you going to be reflecting on as a result of our talk together today?
Um, well, I was kind of surprised I came out with the smoking thing.
Good for you. Yes, thank
So
you.
yeah, so I don't know, maybe I'll try to quit smoking again, for a couple
I have
weeks.
faith in you. I have faith in you. I've known you when you've stopped smoking, and I know how much better you feel. And I know you have so many things you do to take care of yourself. You got the
I do.
cinnamon.
I do a lot of good things too.
You
So
do. You do. And so but here we are. And here we are in the midst of being trauma survivors that I can only speak for myself, but is something I've witnessed in a lot of us. But speaking for myself, every day I face the invitation to think less of myself. And as I think less of myself, the more I feel like, well, I'm not really worth it. So I better, I'm not really worth it. I'm not really worth much. So I'll just keep not loving myself.
right,
Loving myself takes such energy. The default is it's getting better. The default is getting better to like be kind and gentle with myself. When I fell down recently and hurt my knee, I was very loving and gentle to myself. I was like, when the fear started coming, I was like, it's okay, sweetie. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. We're going to breathe now because we know that helps. Talking to all of those terrified little kids inside of me and also talking to myself as an injured 78-year-old on the floor with nobody coming around to help. Yeah, I guess what I'd say is because we need to wrap, is being a survivor is every day either a bane, an opportunity, or both. And I have chosen whenever I can for it to be an opportunity. But that does not mean that the lethargy that comes in that says to me, just go back to bed,
right.
or the lethargy that might come in and say, God, wouldn't a cigarette just be relieving right now? The self medication we do, maybe we could talk about that too. We do it because nobody took care of us. We have a first line of what we can do to take care of us, and we go there if we're tired, halt, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. What's your takeaway, sweetie? Just one of them.
Yeah, my takeaway is keep on healing.
Keep on healing. Yeah. It's like the guy, Rick, whatever his name is, Rick Steves on television that does the travel show. Keep on traveling.
Right.
Keep on healing.
I also tell people keep looking up, like when they post a picture of the moon or something, I always say keep looking up.
Mm-hmm. It's true. There's light there. And we also keep looking inside. And if I stick with it long enough, that's where the light is too. That's where the light is too. The funeral oration at my father's funeral, because the priest, the deacon, knew that my father was a predator. Of course, most of the people in the audience didn't know, and most of the people in the audience didn't want to know, and everybody's keeping
Right.
the
Even
secret.
if they did know, they wouldn't acknowledge.
Correct. So he talked about the broken vessel. It's through the cracks in the vessel that the light comes through. And there it is.
Yep.
We get to choose. We get to choose what to do with the cracks in the vessel because they're there. Okay, hon, I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yep. See you next
Peace
week.
out. And oh my God, wait a minute. Next week, Monday is the day before the election. And I'm going to be flying to California. I don't know what time zone I'll be in, but let's talk afterwards, or let's talk between now and then about when we can do the program, because we might have to do it at a slightly different time. So I
Okay.
can do it before I take off for Anaheim, California. to talk about being an actor, not a reactor to trauma.
Fun.
Yeah, girl, fun and challenging. So happy All Hallows Eve
That's right.
to all friends near and far.